What is your name, please?
Joan Braid,
Okay.
formerly Dutton, and my grandmother was a Seeger, hence Seeger's Farm.
Please.
I'm 85.
85, okay. And where do you live now? Where are we?
Seeger's Farm, Pinfold Lane, Ainsdale.
Okay, so have you always lived here?
Yes, I lived here until I got married and moved to Birkdale. Came back to Ainsdale in 86. My father worked the farm with 2 horses. We grew asparagus and carrots, most vegetables, had a small farm shop, only sold our own produce. We had one. We didn't have a dairy herd. We had a house cow, which we used the milk from the cow was used in the house, and my great aunts made butter on a Monday. That was Monday afternoon's job, making butter. The asparagus really was a very good crop. We sold it locally, but it also went on the train to Liverpool. There was, between here and Ainsdale Village, there were approximately 11 small farms and roughly probably 14 small holdings. Yes, I remember being taken over when the sirens went. I remember being taken over the railway line. There was a crossing at the end of Pinfold Lane. I was taken over into the air raid shelter in the Pine Woods. There's a lodge in the Pine Woods which belongs to the Pilkington family. And the old Mr. and Mrs. Pilkington and Miss Margaret lived here during the war. They came from St Helens, and they had an air raid shelter built into the side of a sandhill. And I was taken over there. I can remember vaguely being over in a sort of an old pushchair, and there was a cot inside this air raid shelter. In this area, there was a landmine dropped in Pinfold Lane behind 6 houses. Nobody was injured. It was amazing. Every window down Pinfold Lane in the few cottages and houses were approximately between 12:30 and 1 p.m. on the 25th of October 1944, on quite a misty day. A B-24 Liberator of the 740 bomb group Bungay in Suffolk made 2 attempts to land at RAF Woodvale, but was on the wrong approach for the runway. The pilot aborted the landing, then circled around, but came in again on the same approach. The pilot then realised that it was wrong and attempted to turn right, but dragged a wing and cartwheeled, burst into flames in a field at Seeger's Farm, Pinfold Lane. There was a crew of 10 aboard, plus 10 airmen heading for the Palace Hotel in Birkdale for R&R, after completing 370 missions altogether over Germany. 4 airmen died in the crash, including the pilot and the co-pilot. 3 died in the sick bay at RAF Woodvale. The remaining 13 seriously injured were taken to the Promenade Hospital in Southport. The pilot was 25 years of age and the co-pilot was 21.
So these were all quite young airmen?
Very young.
Some of who had more or less finished their stints?
Yeah, it was. They were. This was for coming to the Palace Hotel before they were flown back to America.
Yeah.
And unfortunately,
very,
some of them didn't make it.
Yeah.
I was home from school for my lunch, and I remember standing by the back door and this plane coming round very, very low, came between the house and what is our buildings. Very low. I remember my dad saying, he's wrong. And then all I remember after that was a big bang and loads of flame. Well, he came between the house and our outbuildings over there. That's where he was coming in very low.
Yeah.
But that was the third time.
He tried.
He'd had 2 attempts before. Now, they do say that, I mean, I didn't witness it, but they do say that RAF Woodvale sent up 2 planes to try and guide him in.
Right.
But he didn't take any notice of it.
Did you say it was quite misty that day?
It was a bit misty, yeah. It wasn't a very nice day.
Yeah.
So as he came in and realised again, he'd sort of banked to go that way, but his wing, he caught the wing tip on a bank, and it flipped it over. I didn't see it go over, but I saw it coming in and Dad commenting on it, and then there was a big bang and flames. Then I was sent back to school. For many, many years I was frightened of aeroplanes, very frightened, and I would wait under the bridge until the planes had gone.
So it definitely has an effect on man,
yeah. It wasn't till many years later that I sort of became interested in planes, and you know, I can always tell if there's anything strange coming in by the sound of the planes here, and even if I don't see anything, I think, oh, it's not one of ours. And
aware that the
brother of the co-pilot came over. He'd been onto the airfield a few times, and the CO on Woodvale had taken him round, and they were convinced that the runway had been built over the crash site, which was, he was sort of quite distressed about this fact, and as he was heading back and came down the lane and saw Seeger's Farm and came round, and I was able to take him to the spot where... I can't actually stand on the spot where the crash was because it was scattered a bit, but it is now on the airfield.
Right, so it's part of
it's over the fence now on the airfield. It's only 20, 30 yards from our boundary fence, but it is now actually on the airfield, the crash site.
So initially was the crash actually on your...
It was on our land, yeah. It was on, before they took that extra 10 acres of land. Yeah, it actually landed on, it was on the farm.
Yeah. What was the gentleman's name, can you remember?
Who came?
Yeah.
Ron Tompkins.
Okay, so it was his brother.
It was his brother was the co-pilot.
Right, okay. Was it just purely fortuitous that he knocked here, was it?
It just happened to, it was his last day, and he just happened to come from Southport. He'd been staying at the Scaresbrick Hotel, came along and wondered what's down that little bit of lane. Came down and saw the sign on the gate, Seeger's Farm, and it rang a bell because that was in the official report.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And also my father's name, Dutton. He said he saw Seeger's Farm, and then he said it was Dutton. Well, that was my father.
Right.
Okay.
So you've got quite a nice letter.
I've got a lovely letter from him. Yes, yeah. This was a letter from Ron. It just said, it was wonderful to receive a card. I sent him a card. In the process of putting together the information on the Woodvale crash for my brothers and sisters, as well as the 2 remaining survivors. One is a retired doctor in Seattle and the other lives in Kansas. I had spent 5 days in the region trying to put the pieces together. So you are right about the last piece being yourself. I was driving around the airport each night wondering where they crashed. It was haunting me. The whole purpose of the trip was to stand on that spot. The only information I had was from the RAF. They crashed 160 yards short of the runway 22. Then I read somewhere that runway 22 had been extended in 1952. My fear was that the newer runway extension may have covered over the sacred place, so I went to England to find out, and you know the rest of the story. Incidentally, just 2 days earlier, John Burge and I were walking over the runway extension area. All the while, I honestly felt was in the direction which you divulged. When I stopped by your farm that day, I just aimlessly taken a last ride around the area, and then I saw Seeger's Farm. Bells went off in my head. I remember reading that name and Dutton in the old RAF report. So there I was at your door.